I was reaching for my passport when my phone buzzed. My suitcase waited by the door, boarding passes printed, excitement humming through me like electricity. Then, I read her text. "You're not coming to Europe. My husband wants this to be a real family vacation." 15 words that erase 2 decades of building their entire existence from nothing. I set the passport down with steady hands. My daughter had just made the worst miscalculation of her life. What happened next would teach them exactly how real I could be. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Where the hell are my chargers? I was tearing through my desk drawers like a madman, 43 minutes before my taxi to JFK. The European adapters I'd bought last month had vanished into that black hole where important travel items disappear precisely when you need them most. My hands were actually trembling with excitement. 3 weeks in Europe with my daughter, my granddaughter, and yes, even James. The trip I'd been dreaming about since Emma took her first steps in my living room 8 months ago. Emma's stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, she called him, sat on my kitchen counter like a gray velvet sentinel. I'd grabbed him from their house yesterday when Sarah mentioned she'd forgotten to pack it. "Emma won't sleep without him," she'd said, and I'd driven across town at rush hour to retrieve the thing. Anything for my granddaughter's comfort. I tucked Mr. Peanuts into my carry-on, right next to the vintage children's book I'd found at that rare bookstore in Soho. Madeline in Paris, first edition, pristine condition. I'd planned to read it to Emma on our first night at the hotel, maybe start a tradition of bedtime stories in different countries. The house phone rang, cutting through my pre-travel chaos. "Sarah? Dad, you're not bringing those hotel printouts, right?" Her voice had that careful, measured tone she used when she was about to navigate delicate territory. "James has everything organized in his folder. Remember what we talked about?" I paused in my frantic search, my hands still buried in the chaos of my desk drawer. 3 days ago, God, was it only 3 days? Sarah had called with what seemed like a reasonable request. She'd wanted James to handle all the travel documents for this trip, their first big family vacation together. "Let him be the leader for once, Dad," she'd said, and there was something almost pleading in her voice. "You know how he gets when he feels like he's not contributing. This could be really good for his confidence." At the time, I'd felt a warm flush of paternal pride. My daughter was thinking strategically about her marriage, trying to build up her husband's sense of worth. It seemed mature, thoughtful, so I'd agreed immediately. We'd spent 2 hours on the phone transferring everything. The hotel reservations at Le Bristol in Paris, the junior suite with the view of the Faubourg Saint-Honoré that had cost me more than most people's monthly salary. The boutique hotel in Rome near the Spanish Steps. The elegant townhouse rental in London's Kensington district. All of it moved into James's name, with me listed as a passenger. Even the first-class flights I'd booked 6 months in advance, using points I'd accumulated from years of business travel. Everything transferred to James Patterson, the man who'd never successfully planned a weekend trip to the Hamptons. "Right, James has everything," I said now, feeling strangely naked without my usual leather folder of backup documents, confirmation numbers, and emergency contacts. All I had was my passport, my wallet, and a carry-on bag full of carefully chosen gifts. Perfect. Relief flooded Sarah's voice. "And Dad, thanks again for letting James take the lead on this one. It really means a lot to him. You should have seen his face when I told him you trusted him with all the arrangements." There it was again, that familiar twist in my chest. The constant choreography required to preserve James's fragile ego, the elaborate theater we all performed to pretend he was an equal contributor to this family when everyone knew I was funding their entire existence. But I pushed down my irritation. This wasn't about me. This was about Emma getting to see the Eiffel Tower. About Sarah finally getting the European adventure she'd dreamed about since high school, about creating memories that would last generations. "Of course, sweetheart, it's his trip too." The words tasted slightly bitter, but I meant them. Or tried to. "Exactly." Sarah sounded genuinely happy now, lighter somehow. "Oh, and Dad? There's something we need to discuss when we get to the airport. Nothing major, just some last-minute logistics James wanted to go over." My stomach dropped. In my 58 years on this planet, nothing major had never once meant nothing major. It meant something significant that the speaker didn't want to deal with over the phone. What kind of logistics? I tried to keep my voice casual, but I could hear the tension creeping in. Um, oh, just travel stuff. James has some ideas about the itinerary, some changes he wants to suggest. Her voice was already getting more distant, like she was physically pulling away from the phone. We'll talk there, okay? I really need to finish getting Emma ready. I could hear Emma in the background, not crying or fussing, but making those delighted babbling sounds she made when someone was making faces at her. My granddaughter, completely oblivious to whatever adult drama was unfolding around her. Then I heard James's voice, much closer to the phone than it should have been. Is that your dad? Tell him to hurry up or we'll miss our gate time. Our gate time. As if James Patterson, who had shown up 30 minutes late to his own wedding and routinely missed dinner reservations, had suddenly become the family's logistics coordinator. Dad, did you hear that? James says we need to stay on schedule. The condescension in her tone hit me like a physical blow. As if I, who had been traveling internationally for business since before James knew the difference between a passport and a library card, needed reminders about airport timing. I heard him. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. Tell James I've been catching flights since he was in middle school. Dead silence. I'd gone too far, let my irritation show. I could feel Sarah's discomfort radiating through the phone line. Okay, well, her voice was small now, apologetic. We'll see you there, Dad. Terminal 4, Gate 12, right? Gate 12, I confirmed. But she was already saying goodbye, already hanging up before I could ask any more questions about these mysterious logistics we needed to discuss. I set the phone down and stared at it for a long moment. Something about that entire conversation felt wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The careful way Sarah had spoken, like she was following a script. The way James's voice had carried so clearly, as if he'd been standing right next to her, maybe even listening to the entire conversation. But I shook it off. Pre-travel nerves, that's all. James was probably anxious about his first time managing international travel, and Sarah was caught in the middle trying to manage both of us. It would all smooth out once we were actually on the plane, once we were in Paris, once Emma was squealing with delight at the carousel in the Tuileries. I went back to hunting for my chargers, but the excitement I'd been carrying all morning had dimmed somehow. My movements felt mechanical, forced. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting Sarah to call back with a better explanation, but it remained stubbornly silent. 25 minutes before my taxi was due to arrive, I found the adapters wedged behind my printer. I held them up triumphantly to my empty house, but the victory felt hollow. I finished packing with the efficiency of long practice, but my mind kept circling back to that phone call. James wanting to discuss changes to the itinerary at the airport. What changes? We'd spent months planning every detail, researching restaurants, booking tours, making reservations. What could possibly need changing at the last minute? My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter next to Mr. Peanuts. I picked it up twice, started to call Sarah back, then set it down again. Whatever James wanted to discuss could wait until the airport. Maybe it was something simple, upgraded restaurant reservations, or better theater tickets, or additional tours he'd found online. The taxi was due in 15 minutes when my phone finally buzzed. I grabbed it eagerly, expecting a text from the driver or maybe a last-minute message from Sarah about meeting locations. Instead, there was a message from my daughter that made my blood stop moving in my veins. I read the first few words and felt the entire world tilt sideways. Everything, the months of planning, the careful arrangements, the dreams of walking cobblestone streets with my granddaughter, all of it crystallized into a single, devastating moment of clarity. I set the phone down with hands that had gone completely numb. The silence in my house was deafening. I picked up the phone again, read the message in full this time, each word settling into my consciousness like stones dropped into still water. You're not coming to Europe. My husband wants this to be a real family vacation. Then the follow-up. We'll send pictures. Thanks for understanding, Dad. I set the phone down carefully on the kitchen table. My hands weren't shaking. Not yet. There had to be some explanation. Maybe James had grabbed Sarah's phone by mistake. Maybe this was some kind of misunderstanding that would be cleared up with a simple phone call. I dialed Sarah's number, my finger steady on each digit. The rational part of my mind was still insisting this had to be fixable. One ring, two, then straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Sarah? Leave a message and I'll get back to you. That cheerful voice, the same recording she'd had for 3 years. I could picture her making it, laughing as she recorded it, Emma babbling in the background. I hung up without leaving a message and tried again immediately. Voicemail again. A cold weight was settling in my stomach now, the kind you get when you're standing on thin ice and start to hear it crack. I scrolled through my contacts and found James's number. Maybe if I talked to him directly, we could work this out man to man. Didn't even ring, just a flat, automated voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I stared at my phone screen. When had James changed his number? And why hadn't anyone mentioned it to me? My third call to Sarah went through. Dad. Her voice was small, guilty. Sarah. I kept my tone level, controlled. Years of business negotiations had taught me that the person who stays calm usually wins. I just got your text message. I'm hoping there's been some kind of miscommunication. Silence. I could hear Emma making happy sounds in the background, that particular giggle she made when someone was tickling her feet. My granddaughter, completely oblivious to whatever adult drama was unfolding around her. Dad, I can explain. Can she? I thought. Can she really explain how we went from planning a family vacation to this? But I kept my voice steady. I'm listening. It's just, James really wanted this to be special, just for our little family. You know how he feels about... She trailed off. How he feels about what, Sarah? My jaw was starting to ache from keeping it clenched. About competing with you, Dad. You've been so generous with us, and he feels like he can never measure up. This trip was supposed to be his chance to provide something for Emma and me without feeling like he's in your shadow. The words hit me like individual slaps. In my shadow. As if loving my daughter and granddaughter, as if wanting to give them beautiful experiences, was somehow a character flaw. So the solution was to exclude me completely? I managed to keep my voice from rising, but I could feel heat building behind my eyes. Just this once, Dad. Just for this one trip, so James can feel like the man of the family. The man of the family. I thought about James showing up 30 minutes late to his own wedding because he'd lost track of time playing video games. I thought about the 3 business ventures I'd funded that had all failed within 6 months. I thought about the mortgage payments I'd been making on their house for 2 years now. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I asked quietly, "And you agreed with this plan?" More silence. Longer this time. I could practically feel her squirming through the phone. Dad, please try to understand. Marriage is about compromise, and sometimes, when did you decide this? The question came out sharper than I intended. When did you two decide I wasn't welcome on the family vacation I planned and paid for? It wasn't like that. When, Sarah? She was crying now, soft sniffles that once upon a time would have melted my heart. Before I learned that my daughter was capable of this level of calculated betrayal. A few days ago. After we transferred all the documents to James's name, he said it would be the perfect opportunity to finally have a real family trip. A few days ago, while I'd been excitedly packing my bags, researching restaurants, printing out maps of Paris for Emma to look at, they'd been planning my exclusion. The transfer of documents suddenly made perfect sense. Sarah's careful request about letting James take the lead hadn't been about building his confidence. It had been about giving them the tools they needed to cut me out. I see. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, oddly hollow. So when you called 3 days ago asking me to put everything in James's name, you were already planning this. Dad. No, it wasn't. You manipulated me into giving you exactly what you needed to exclude me from my own vacation. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The words burst out of her, desperate and raw. James just kept talking about how this could be our chance to prove we don't need help with everything, and I thought maybe just this once. You thought what, Sarah? That I wouldn't notice? That I'd just accept being dismissed like hired help? She was crying harder now. In the background, I could hear Emma getting fussy, picking up on her mother's distress. The sound of my granddaughter's confusion made something twist painfully in my chest. Dad, please don't be angry. We can plan another trip, just you and me, maybe, or a long weekend somewhere with Emma. After this, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. After you've shown me exactly where I stand in your family hierarchy, you're my father. You'll always be important to us, just not important enough to include in the family vacation. Dad, please. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened them, I was looking at Mr. Peanut sitting on my kitchen counter. Emma's beloved elephant, the one she couldn't sleep without, the one I'd driven across town to get for her, the one that was supposed to comfort her on her first night in a foreign country. Sarah, I said quietly, I hope you have a wonderful time in Europe. Dad, give Emma my love. Tell her Grandpa hopes she has magical adventures. Dad, wait, please don't hang up like this. And Sarah, next time you need something from me, remember this conversation. I hung up before she could respond. My phone buzzed almost immediately, a text from some messaging app I didn't recognize. Dad, please don't do this. We can work it out when we get back. I deleted it without responding and turned off my phone. The house felt different now. Too quiet, too empty, like a stage set after the actors have all gone home. I walked to my carry-on bag and pulled out Mr. Peanuts, holding him up to the light. His button eyes seemed to stare back at me accusingly. I thought about Emma waking up tomorrow morning in a luxury hotel in Paris, looking around for her comfort object and not finding it. I thought about her crying for Mr. Peanuts in a foreign country while her parents tried to explain that Grandpa wasn't there to help. Part of me, the part that had been a father for 28 years, wanted to call a courier service, have the elephant rush to JFK, make sure Emma had everything she needed for her first big adventure. But another part of me, a newer part that was just beginning to take shape, thought differently. They wanted a real family vacation without me. They'd gotten exactly what they asked for. Every single consequence that came with it. I set Mr. Peanuts back on the kitchen counter and looked around my house. At the success I'd built from nothing, at the life I'd created that had supported 3 generations of my family, at the evidence of 2 decades spent putting other people's needs ahead of my own. Maybe it was time to reconsider those priorities. Maybe it was time for them to learn what a real family vacation looked like when the person who made it all possible decided to step back. I hoped they'd have a wonderful trip. I really did. But I was also starting to think about how educational it might be for them to discover just how much their independence had actually been costing me all these years. After all, the best lessons are often the most expensive ones. I found myself standing in my study 20 minutes later, staring at the wall of diplomas and certificates. MBA from Wharton, Series 7 license. 23 years of building financial portfolios from nothing. All the credentials that had allowed me to create the life that supported everyone in my family. Without really thinking about it, I pulled out the bottom drawer of my desk and retrieved the thick folder I kept there. Sarah and Family. Written in my careful handwriting on the tab. Inside were copies of every financial document, every loan, every investment I'd made in my daughter's life. The down payment on their house, $125,000. I remembered Sarah's face when I'd handed her the cashier's check, how she'd cried and called me the best father in the world. The monthly mortgage assistance, $2,400, automatically transferred for the past 18 months. Just until James gets his consulting business off the ground. Sarah had said that was 2 years ago. The car loan I'd co-signed and been making payments on, $847 monthly for Emma's safety. A fully loaded Audi Q7 that James had insisted they needed because Emma deserves the best. Emergency funds over the past year, $4,300. Emma's medical expenses when she had pneumonia, the water damage in their basement. James's business equipment purchases that never seemed to generate any actual business. I turned the pages methodically, each one a reminder of choices I'd made out of love, out of a desire to ensure my daughter and granddaughter never wanted for anything. Page after page of bank transfers, receipts, loan documents, a paper trail of devotion that stretched back to Emma's birth. Total investment in Sarah's adult life, $247,000. But that didn't count the smaller things. The dinners I'd paid for every time we went out as a family because James would inevitably Forget his wallet. The groceries I'd buy when I visited, claiming I happened to pick up a few things. The utilities I'd helped with during James's lean months. It also didn't count the intangibles, the business contacts I'd shared with James, trying to help him find work, the glowing references I'd written for him, stretching the truth about his minimal experience. The nights I'd stayed up helping Sarah research pediatricians, schools, babysitters, all the invisible labor of supporting a young family. I was so absorbed in the numbers that I almost didn't hear my phone ring. The sound cut through my calculations like an alarm bell. Unknown number, probably a spam call. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello. Frank, we need to talk. James's voice tight with anger. This is ridiculous. I sat back in my leather chair, folder still open in front of me. Hello, James. Shouldn't you be boarding a flight to Europe? We're at the gate now, and Sarah is a wreck. She's been crying for an hour because of what you said to her. The audacity of it hit me like a physical force. Sarah was upset? She was crying? I see. And you thought calling me to discuss this was a good idea? Someone needs to be the adult here, Frank. Sarah tried to explain the situation to you, and instead of being understanding, you made her feel terrible about wanting to take a family trip. I could hear airport announcements in the background, the bustle of travelers, the mechanical voice calling boarding groups. They were really doing this. They were really leaving without me. A family trip? I repeated slowly. Is that what you're calling it? That's what it is. Look, I get that you're disappointed, but you can't just guilt trip Sarah because we want some independence. Independence. The word tasted bitter. James, do you know how much money I've invested in your family's life over the past 2 years? That's exactly the problem, Frank. You keep track of every dollar like you're our landlord or something. We never asked you to keep score. I looked down at the folder in front of me. Nearly $250,000 in concrete, documented support. Not to mention the countless small kindnesses, the emergency babysitting, the professional connections, the emotional labor of being an involved father and grandfather. You're right, I said quietly. You never asked me to keep score, but maybe I should have started keeping it a long time ago. What's that supposed to mean? It means, James, that independence is a wonderful thing. I hope you enjoy discovering what it actually costs. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing, could practically feel him trying to figure out if that was a threat. Frank, don't be petty about this. We're not trying to hurt you. We just want to prove we can handle things on our own for once. On your own, I mused. With the hotel reservations I booked, and the first-class flights I paid for, and the spending money I transferred to Sarah's account last week. That's different. That money was for the trip. Money I earned, for a trip I was supposed to be taking with you. His voice was getting sharper now. Look, I don't have time for this. They're calling our boarding group, and Sarah's already upset enough. When we get back, we can all sit down and work this out like adults. James, I kept my voice conversational, almost friendly. Have a wonderful time in Europe. I mean that sincerely. Okay, thanks, I guess. Give Emma my love. Tell her grandpa hopes she has magical adventures in Paris. I will. He sounded confused now, like he'd been prepared for a fight and wasn't sure how to handle civility. And James, when you get back, make sure you have Sarah call me. We'll definitely need to sit down and discuss some things. Right. Okay, we can do that. I hung up and sat in the sudden silence of my study. Through the window, I could see my neighbor Tom working on his vintage Mustang in his driveway, the same car he'd been restoring with methodical patience for 3 years. Some things, I reflected, grew beautiful with the right conditions. But what happened when you withdrew the conditions? When you stopped watering, stopped fertilizing, stopped providing the careful support that made growth possible? I opened my laptop and began typing. First, an email to my bank about setting up automatic transfer cancellations, then another to my accountant about adjusting certain monthly obligations. They wanted to discover what independence looked like. I was about to give them the most comprehensive education they'd ever received. They thought they were leaving for a 3-week vacation in Europe. But when they came back, they'd be returning to a very different world than the one they'd left behind. I was going to make sure of that. The best part? I'd do it all with the same generous spirit I'd always shown them. After all, there's no better gift than helping someone learn to stand on their own 2 feet, even if the lesson was going to be more expensive than they'd ever imagined. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into my bank and sat down with Jennifer, my private banker for the past 8 years. She'd helped me set up trust funds, manage investments, navigate the complexities of supporting multiple generations of family. I need to make some changes to my automatic transfers, I said, sliding a typed list across her mahogany desk. Jennifer reviewed the list, her eyebrows rising slightly. All of these? The mortgage assistance, the car payment, the insurance premiums? All of them. Effective immediately. She looked up at me with the careful expression of someone who'd seen family financial disputes before. Frank, are you sure about this? Some of these have been in place for years. I'm sure. My daughter and son-in-law have decided they want financial independence. I'm simply helping them achieve their goal. 20 minutes later, I was walking out of the bank feeling lighter somehow, as if I'd been carrying invisible weights for years and had finally set them down. I drove straight to my brother David's office. He ran a successful law practice downtown, specializing in family financial planning. More importantly, he was the only person who'd ever had the courage to tell me I was spoiling Sarah. Let me get this straight, David said after I'd explained the situation. He was twirling a pen between his fingers, a habit he'd had since law school when he was working through complex problems. They planned this vacation for months, let you pay for everything, transferred all the documents to James's name, then texted you 15 minutes before departure to tell you that you weren't welcome? That's the timeline. Yes. David set the pen down and leaned forward. Frank, I've been practicing family law for 20 years. I've seen some spectacular acts of entitlement, but this, he shook his head, this is breathtaking. I keep thinking I must have misunderstood something, that there's some explanation that makes this reasonable. There isn't. David's voice was flat, certain. You've been played, brother. Expertly and deliberately played. The words hit harder coming from him. David had never been one for emotional declarations or dramatic statements. When he said something with that kind of certainty, it was based on evidence and experience. The question now, he continued, is what are you going to do about it? I've already started. All the automatic transfers are canceled as of this morning. David nodded approvingly. Good. What else? What do you mean, what else? Frank, they just stole a $30,000 vacation from you. If anyone else had done that, you'd have them arrested for fraud. The fact that it's family doesn't make it less of a crime. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but David was right. They'd obtained money and services under false pretenses, then excluded the person who'd provided them. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you start thinking like a businessman instead of a father. Document everything. Save every text, every email, every financial record, because this isn't going to end with a vacation, Frank. People who are capable of this level of manipulation don't just stop. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. A photo of Emma in front of the Eiffel Tower, her chubby little hands pressed against the stroller tray, eyes wide with wonder. The message read, Emma's first day in Paris. She keeps looking around like she's searching for someone. Wish you were here to see her face, Dad. I stared at that line, wish you were here, and felt something bitter rise in my throat. They wished I was there, but only as a spectator to the vacation I'd funded. Not as a participant. Not as family. The irony was so thick it was almost funny. Emma was looking around for someone who wasn't there, and they were sending me photos to show me what I was missing, as if I needed a reminder of the betrayal. I screenshot the photo and set my phone aside without responding. Tuesday brought another photo. Emma in a park, apparently the Luxembourg Gardens, surrounded by other children and pigeons. This time Sarah had written, She's being so good. James is amazing with her. We're having the most wonderful time. James is amazing with her. I wondered if that line was meant to hurt or if Sarah was just thoughtlessly emphasizing how unnecessary I was to their happiness. Again, I saved the photo and didn't respond. Wednesday's photo showed Emma sleeping in what looked like a luxury hotel room, Mr. Peanuts notably absent from the frame. The message was shorter, Missing you, Dad. I stared at that photo for a long time. Emma sleeping peacefully in a room I'd paid for during a trip I'd planned, surrounded by luxury I'd provided. And somewhere in that room, James and Sarah were probably congratulating themselves on their successful independence. Thursday morning, my phone rang. James. I let it ring 3 times before answering, using the time to center myself. Frank, we need to talk. His voice was tighter than usual, strained. There was an edge to it that hadn't been there during our last conversation. Good morning, James. How's Paris treating you? I kept my tone light, almost cheerful. That's what I'm calling about. There's been some kind of mix-up with our accounts. The hotel tried to charge our card for the room, and it was declined. Sarah's credit card, too. Here we go, I thought. The first cracks in their independent paradise. That's odd. Have you called your bank? Of course I called the bank. His voice was getting sharper now, frustration bleeding through. They said there's been some unusual activity on Sarah's account. A bunch of automatic payments were canceled, and now she's overdrawn. Shishay, I felt a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. How unfortunate. Frank, did you do something to our accounts? The accusatory tone sent a spike of annoyance through me, but I kept my voice level. I don't have access to your accounts, James. Those are your accounts. Don't play games with me. Now he was getting angry, and I could hear the entitlement creeping in. Sarah's mortgage payment bounced yesterday. The insurance company called saying her car insurance was canceled for non-payment. What the hell is going on? I walked to my window, looked out at Tom working on his Mustang. He was installing a new carburetor today, I noticed. Taking care of his investment with his own hands, his own money, his own time. James, it sounds like you're having some cash flow problems. That happens sometimes when you're learning to manage finances independently. Cut the crap, Frank. I know you were making those payments. Sarah told me about the mortgage help and the car payment and all the rest of it. Sarah told him. Of course she had. Probably in detail, probably with an itemized list of everything Daddy had been paying for. I wondered if she'd framed it as generosity or burden. Was I? I kept my voice light, curious. And what exactly did Sarah tell you about that arrangement? She said you insisted on helping because you didn't think I could provide for my family. Well, guess what? I can. I just need you to stop sabotaging us. The word sabotaging hit me like a slap. After everything I'd given them, after every sacrifice I'd made, he was accusing me of sabotage for simply stepping back. My jaw clenched involuntarily. Sabotaging you? James, I thought you wanted independence. I thought you wanted to prove you could handle things without my help. This isn't what I meant, and you know it. Ah, there it is. They wanted independence without consequences. They wanted to exclude me from their lives while keeping my financial support. They wanted all the benefits of having me as a father and grandfather with none of the respect that should come with those relationships. I'm confused. You exclude me from the family vacation because you want to be independent. But then when independence involves actually paying your own bills, that's sabotage? The line was quiet for a moment. I could hear Emma crying in the background and Sarah's voice trying to soothe her. The sound of my granddaughter's distress sent a pang through my chest, but I pushed it down. Look, Frank, I get that you're upset about the trip, but taking it out on Emma isn't fair. She needs stability, and you're putting her at risk with these games. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. My vision actually darkened for a moment. After everything I'd done for Emma, every medical bill I'd paid, every emergency I'd handled, every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about her welfare, James was accusing me of endangering her. I'm putting Emma at risk? My voice came out quieter than I intended, but there was steel underneath it. Yes. What if we can't pay for her formula? What if we can't afford her doctor visits when we get back? You're using a baby as a pawn in your petty revenge scheme. Something cold and precise crystallized in my chest. This wasn't anger anymore. This was something much more dangerous. James had just crossed a line he didn't even know existed. James, I said quietly, my voice deadly calm, let me ask you something. When Catherine was dying, did you know her greatest fear? What does that have to do with anything? He sounded impatient now, dismissive. She was terrified that after she was gone, Sarah would marry someone who would take advantage of her trusting nature. someone who would see her inheritance and her family connections as a meal ticket rather than a responsibility. Frank, what the hell? The profanity, directed at me while discussing my dead wife, sent a surge of cold fury through my veins. My hands were trembling now, but not with weakness, with the effort of holding back. Catherine made me promise to always protect Sarah from people who might exploit her generosity. And for 5 years, I thought maybe she'd been wrong about you. I thought maybe you really did love my daughter for who she is. I do love Sarah. But this conversation has been very educational, James. Thank you for clarifying exactly what kind of man you really are. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at the photo of Emma I'd saved from yesterday, her innocent face pressed against the stroller, looking around for someone who wasn't there. My granddaughter being used as emotional leverage by a man who'd just proven he had no honor, no integrity, no understanding of what family actually meant. It means, James, that when you get back from your real family vacation, you're going to discover just how real the consequences of independence can be. Are you threatening us? His voice had gone up an octave, and I could hear genuine concern creeping in. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply stepping back and letting you be the man of the family you've always claimed you wanted to be. I hung up and immediately called my attorney. It was time to have a very serious conversation about exactly what family meant in legal terms, and what it meant when that family decided you weren't real enough to include in their lives. Friday morning, I sat in my attorney's office reviewing documents I'd signed 3 years ago, but never really considered the implications of. Richard spread the papers across his mahogany conference table like a poker player revealing a winning hand. You're absolutely certain about this, Frank? He tapped the deed with his gold pen. Once we list it, there's no undoing the psychological impact. I looked at the property deed for 47 Maple Street, Sarah and James's dream home. The house was titled in my name, with Sarah listed as a beneficiary upon my death, not a co-owner, not a joint holder, a beneficiary. At the time, I'd structured it that way for tax purposes. Estate planning, Richard had called it, keeps things clean. Sarah had been so overwhelmed with gratitude for the down payment that she'd signed whatever I'd put in front of her. James had been so eager to get the keys that he'd barely glanced at the paperwork. They wanted independence, I said, studying the address where my granddaughter was learning to walk, where my daughter was building her life. This is what independence looks like. Richard pulled out another folder. The mortgage is interesting too. You're listed as the primary borrower with them as occupants. Legally speaking, they're essentially tenants with a very generous landlord. We're tenants, I corrected. Past tense. He nodded and reached for his phone. I'll call Rebecca Martinez at Premier Properties. She's discreet, effective, and she specializes in sensitive family transitions. While Richard made the call, I walked to his window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Sarah and James were probably having breakfast at a sidewalk cafe in Paris, spending my money and congratulating themselves on their successful manipulation. Emma was probably babbling at pigeons, completely unaware that her world was about to shift dramatically. Rebecca can have the listing active by Monday, Richard said, hanging up. She's suggesting a price point that should generate immediate interest. The market's hot right now, especially for that neighborhood. I thought about Emma's nursery, the one I'd helped Sarah design, the custom built-ins I'd paid for, the hand-painted murals, the rocking chair where I'd spent countless hours reading bedtime stories. All of it would be photographed, staged, presented to strangers as charming family spaces. What's the typical timeline for a sale in that area? Well priced? 30 to 60 days. Rebecca thinks we might see offers within the first week. I calculated quickly. They'd be back from Europe in 18 days. The house would already be on the market, already be attracting buyers, already be generating the kind of neighborhood gossip that would reach them before they even unpacked. Frank, Richard's voice was careful. Once you do this, you change the entire dynamic. They'll understand that you're not just temporarily withdrawing support, you're fundamentally restructuring their reality. I pulled out my phone and looked at the latest photo Sarah had sent. Emma at what looked like a cafe, chocolate smeared across her cheeks, laughing at something off camera. The message read, "Someone discovered French pastries. She's having the time of her life. Can't wait to show you all the videos when we get back." Can't wait to show you all the videos. As if we'd sit around my living room like nothing had happened, as if I'd coo over footage of the vacation they'd stolen from me. Richard, in your professional opinion, what's the difference between someone who makes a mistake and someone who commits fraud? He considered this. Intent and pattern of behavior. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned, calculated, and executed with precision. They used my love for my daughter and granddaughter as a weapon against me. I looked at Emma's chocolate-covered face one more time, then put my phone away. List the house, Richard. Today. 3 hours later, I received a text from Rebecca Martinez with photos of the for sale sign being installed in the front yard. Professional, tasteful, unavoidable. I wondered how long it would take the neighbors to start talking, how long before someone posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, how long before the news found its way to Sarah's best friend, then to Sarah's mother-in-law, then to someone who would feel compelled to give them a heads up. They wanted a real family vacation? They were about to get a real education in what happened when you bite the hand that houses you. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in my study, reading a financial report, when my phone lit up with Sarah's number. I'd unblocked them that morning, not out of forgiveness, but because I wanted to be available when reality finally hit. "Dad?" Sarah's voice was barely recognizable, raw from crying. "Dad, please tell me this is some kind of mistake." I set down my report and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful, normal. "Hello, Sarah? How was your flight?" "The house." Her voice cracked completely. "There's a sold sign in our front yard. Our neighbors are saying you put it up for sale 3 weeks ago. Please tell me this isn't real." I could hear Emma crying in the background, that particular wail that meant she was overtired and overstimulated. The sound tugged at something deep in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "The house sold faster than expected. Rebecca said it was the kitchen that really sealed the deal for the buyers." "Dad, this is our home. Emma's home. You can't just—" "Actually, Sarah, I can. The deed is in my name, always has been." Silence. Then, James's voice, sharp and desperate. "Frank, we need to talk. Right now, face to face." 20 minutes later, they were at my front door. Sarah was still in her travel clothes, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. James looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 weeks, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. Emma was asleep in her car seat, mercifully oblivious to the adult chaos surrounding her. I let them into my living room, the same room where we'd planned their European vacation 6 months ago, where I'd shown Sarah the hotel photos on my laptop, where Emma had taken her first steps toward my outstretched arms. "Dad, please," Sarah started before she'd even sat down. "I know you're angry about the trip, and I understand why, but this is— Do you?" I asked quietly. "Do you really understand why? Yes, you felt excluded, and we handled it badly, and I'm sorry, but stop." The word came out sharper than I intended. Sarah flinched. "Sarah, do you understand that what you did wasn't just hurtful? It was theft." James stepped forward, his face flushed. "Theft? We're your family, Frank. You don't steal from family." I looked at him for a long moment, this man who just accused me of theft after spending 3 weeks in Europe on my money. Filed, "You're absolutely right, James. You don't steal from family," which raises some interesting questions about what happened here. "We didn't steal anything," Sarah said, but her voice was small, uncertain. "You obtained money and services under false pretenses. You made me believe I was funding a family vacation, then excluded me after the money was transferred and the arrangements were non-refundable." I kept my tone conversational, almost academic. "In legal terms, that's fraud." "Legal terms?" James's voice was getting higher. "You're talking about legal terms with your own daughter?" "I'm talking about consequences, James, something you both seem to have trouble understanding." Sarah was crying again now, soft hiccups that reminded me of when she was 5 years old and had broken Catherine's favorite vase. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We made a terrible mistake, and I know that now. But please don't punish Emma for our stupidity." "Emma." I looked at my granddaughter, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, her tiny fist curled around Mr. Peanuts, the elephant they'd somehow acquired a replacement for during their trip. "You think this is about punishing Emma?" Isn't it? James demanded. You're making a baby homeless because your feelings got hurt. The accusation hit me like a slap, but I'd been expecting it. This was James's pattern. When cornered, attack. When facing consequences, play the victim. I'm not making anyone homeless, James. I'm simply no longer providing free housing to adults who've demonstrated they don't value what I provide. She's your daughter. Yes, she is. And Emma is my granddaughter, which is why I've set up a trust fund for Emma that will cover all her needs: healthcare, education, clothing, activities, everything a child requires. Sarah's head snapped up. What? Emma will never want for anything. College is already paid for. Her medical needs are covered. Her future is secure. I looked directly at Sarah. But you two are adults. You've made it clear you want independence, so you'll have it. Dad, we can't afford. Of course you can't. Not the lifestyle you've been living. Not the house, the car, the restaurants, the vacations. But millions of families make it work on less than James makes from his consulting business. James's face was red now. My consulting business doesn't bring in enough to. Then perhaps you should find additional work, or Sarah could return to practicing law. You have options. Return to law? Sarah looked stricken. Dad, I haven't practiced in 3 years. I'd have to start over. And with Emma, millions of mothers work while raising children, Sarah. It's not ideal, but it's doable. I watched my daughter process this, watched her realize that the comfortable life she'd taken for granted was ending. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to take it all back, to return to the familiar pattern of providing and protecting. But a larger part of me, the part that had been systematically manipulated and then betrayed, remained unmoved. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You have 30 days to find alternative housing. I'll provide temporary accommodation assistance, first month's rent and security deposit on an apartment within your actual budget. Emma's trust fund will cover all her direct expenses, but your mortgage assistance, car payments, insurance premiums, and general financial support end permanently. Dad, please. This isn't a negotiation, Sarah. This is the new reality. You wanted independence from my shadow. Now you have it. James was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. You're destroying your own family over a vacation. No, James. You destroyed this family when you decided I wasn't real enough to include in it. I'm simply adapting to the new definition of family that you created. Sarah was sobbing openly now. Dad, I love you. Emma loves you. Please don't do this to us, say. I looked at Emma again, my beautiful granddaughter who would grow up knowing her grandfather as the man who'd provided for her future, not as an ATM for her parents' lifestyle. I love you both too, I said quietly, which is exactly why I'm doing this. You need to learn to stand on your own. And Emma needs to see what real independence looks like, not the artificial version you've been living. They left an hour later, after Sarah had begged and James had threatened, and I had remained unmoved. As I watched their car pull out of my driveway, the car I'd been making payments on for 2 years, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. For the first time in years, everyone in my family knew exactly where they stood. There were no more ambiguities, no more unspoken expectations, no more one-sided relationships disguised as family bonds. They wanted a real family. Now they'd learn what that actually cost.